The silk of Elisa's dress felt like a cage. It was the prettiest thing she had ever owned, a pale blue river of fabric whispering against her skin, but tonight it felt tight and strange. Her mother had fussed for hours, pinning her hair and telling her to smile, to be sweet, to be the perfect picture of a lady. But they wouldn't tell her why. They only said a very important man had requested a meeting, and that her family's future depended on her being charming. Elise felt like a prize lamb being led to a secret altar. The meeting place was not a stuffy parlor, but a walled garden hidden behind their family villa. Twilight was painting the sky in shades of purple and orange, and the air was thick with the smell of jasmine and wet earth. Fireflies, like tiny, captured stars, blinked in and out of the darkening bushes. It was magical, and that made the whole thing even more terrifying. Why such a beautiful place for something that felt so scary? She stood by a marble fountain, its gentle splash the only sound, and waited. Her heart was a frantic bird beating against her ribs. She twisted her hands together, wishing she were back in her room with her books, in a world where stories were safe and men were not mysterious or dangerous. Then the atmosphere changed. It wasn't a sound she heard first, but a feeling. A shift in the air, a new kind of silence that fell over the garden. The hair on her arms stood up. She turned slowly, her breath catching in her throat. A man emerged from the shadows between two cypress trees. He was not merely tall, he seemed to draw all the space in the garden toward him. He was dressed in a simple, dark suit that did nothing to hide the powerful width of his shoulders. This was Julian. He moved with a quiet, confident grace that spoke of absolute control, like a predator who knew every inch of his territory. He stopped a few feet from her, and his eyes found hers in the dim light. They were the color of a stormy sea, dark and intense, and they didn't blink. They simply took her in, studying every detail of her face, her dress, her nervously clasped hands. It was the most direct look she had ever received, and it felt like he could see past the silk and the carefully pinned hair, straight into the scared, young woman underneath. A shiver, cold and hot at the same time, raced down her spine. He didn't smile. His face was all sharp angles and quiet strength, a face that held 1,000 secrets and wasn't planning on sharing any of them. He was nothing like the boys from the village who would blush and stammer around her. This man was a fortress, and his gaze was a physical weight. Elise. He said her name. Just one word, but his voice was a low, deep rumble that vibrated right through her, settling in the pit of her stomach. It was a voice used to giving orders, a voice that expected to be obeyed. She could only manage a small, shaky nod. "I am Julian," he said, his tone flat, factual. He didn't move closer, but he didn't need to. His presence filled the entire garden. "I assume your family explained the situation." "They said you were important," Elise whispered, her own voice sounding terribly young and fragile. A ghost of something, not a smile, but a flicker of understanding, crossed his features. Important is one word for it. He finally took a step forward, and Elise had to fight the instinct to step back. He was close enough now that she could smell the faint, clean scent of his soap, mixed with something else, something wild and masculine like sandalwood. "They likely did not tell you the whole truth. Our lives will not be normal. There will be shadows. There will be danger." Elise's eyes widened. Danger? The word hung in the air, real and sharp. "I am not a gentle man," Julian continued, his stormy eyes locked on hers, refusing to let her look away from the truth. "My world is not made of garden parties and soft words. It is made of strength and silence and iron will." Her heart hammered. This was a mistake. This was a nightmare. She wanted to run. But his next word stopped her. "But," he said, and that single word held a strange, new weight. "I protect what is mine. With my life. With everything that I am. If you walk this path with me, you will be the most protected person in this city. No one will ever harm you. No one will ever frighten you again." The promise was fierce, absolute. It wasn't a sweet poem or a flowery compliment. It was a vow, carved from stone and sealed with fire. It was the most terrifying and the most thrilling thing anyone had ever said to her. The fear in her chest began to mix with a wild, curious spark. He watched the conflict play out on her face. He saw the fear, but he also saw the dawning curiosity. Slowly, almost impossibly slowly, he lifted his hand. In it, she hadn't even noticed, he held a single rose. It was a deep, blood-red velvet, perfect and unfurling. It was a shock of vibrant color in the twilight, a thing of breathtaking beauty presented by a man who dealt in darkness. He didn't hand it to her. He simply held it out, his eyes asking a silent question. Elisa's breath hitched. This was the moment. She could turn and flee back to her safe, boring life. Or she could reach out and touch the thorny, beautiful, dangerous thing he was offering. Hesitantly, her fingers trembling, she reached out. Instead of giving her the stem, his other hand came up. His fingers, strong and warm, brushed against hers as he took her hand. The contact was electric. It was a jolt of pure lightning that shot up her arm, making her gasp softly. His skin was rough, a working man's hand, a warrior's hand, and it enveloped hers completely. He turned her palm upward and placed the rose gently in its center. The petals were soft as a whisper against her skin, but the thorns on the stem were sharp and threatening. His fingers lingered for a moment, holding her hand captive with a touch that was surprisingly not harsh, but possessive. His eyes darkened, and for a fleeting second, she saw something raw and intense in their depths, a hunger, a need, a loneliness that mirrored her own. 13 inches, he murmured, his voice so low it was almost part of the night breeze. Elise blinked, confused. What? He didn't explain. He simply gave her hand one last, searing squeeze and then released it. The warmth of his touch remained, branding her skin. Think about it, Elise, he said. Then, he turned and walked away, melting back into the shadows from which he came as silently as he had arrived. She was left alone by the fountain, the cool marble at her back, the frantic beat of her heart in her ears, and the perfect, thorny rose in her hand. The garden felt empty and cold without his overwhelming presence. She lifted the flower to her nose, its scent rich and intoxicating. 13 inches? The mysterious words echoed in her mind. What did it mean? Was it a threat? A promise? A piece of a puzzle she didn't understand? She looked toward the darkness where he had vanished, her fear now completely replaced by a burning, desperate need to know the answer. The hook was set. The innocent girl was gone, and in her place was a woman teetering on the edge of a very dangerous, very exciting cliff, desperate to see what lay in the shadows below. The wedding was not in a grand church, but in a small, sun-dappled chapel deep in the countryside, with only a priest and 2 of Julian's most trusted men as witnesses. Elise wore a simple, elegant dress of cream-colored silk, and Julian's eyes, darker and more intense than ever, never left her face as they exchanged their vows. His voice was steady and sure when he said, "I do," and when he slipped a heavy, antique gold band onto her finger, it felt less like a piece of jewelry and more like a permanent claim. He didn't take her to a bustling city or a crowded resort. Instead, a long, quiet car ride brought them to a hidden house nestled on the edge of a vast, glassy lake. The world here was painted in watercolors, soft greens, hazy blue skies, and the gentle lapping of waves against a wooden dock. It was a sanctuary, a world away from the shadows he had warned her about. This, she understood, was a part of him he showed to no one else. For the first few days, they existed in a quiet, careful dance. Julian was often on the phone in his study, his voice a low, commanding murmur, but the moment he stepped out to find her, his entire demeanor would shift. The harsh lines of his face would soften just a little. He would ask her about the book she was reading, or if she liked the food his private chef had prepared. He was trying, she realized with a jolt. This powerful, dangerous man was trying to be gentle for her. One afternoon, he found her sitting on the end of the dock, her bare feet skimming the cool surface of the water. Without a word, he sat beside her, close enough that his arm brushed against hers. The simple contact sent a thrill through her, so much more potent than the fear she had felt in the garden. "Are you happy here, Elise?" he asked, his gaze on the distant mountains. She looked at his profile, at the strong line of his jaw and the way the sun caught the hints of gold in his brown hair. "I am not unhappy," she said carefully, truthfully. It's peaceful. But I feel like I'm living with a stranger. He turned his head, his stormy eyes capturing hers. What do you want to know? The rose, she whispered, her courage surprising her. What did you mean? 13 inches. A slow, real smile, the first genuine one she had ever seen from him, touched his lips, transforming his entire face. It was a breathtaking sight. I wondered when you would ask. That evening, after a quiet dinner on the terrace, he led her into the garden behind the house. Night-blooming flowers filled the air with a sweet, heavy perfume. He guided her to a stone bench, and they sat, his large, warm hand enveloping hers. His touch was becoming familiar, a source of warmth she was starting to crave. The first time I saw you, he began, his voice a low rumble in the darkness, you were in your family's garden, before our meeting. You were talking to a butterfly that had landed on your finger. You were smiling, so free and full of light. I knew in that moment, my world of shadows would either destroy that light, or I would have to move heaven and earth to protect it. Elise's breath caught. He had been watching her. My warning in the garden was real, he continued, his thumb stroking slow, hypnotic circles on the back of her hand. I'm not a safe man. My love is not a quiet stream, Elise. It is a storm. It is loud and it is powerful and it will be overwhelming. It will demand everything. He turned to fully face her, his expression so open and raw it made her heart ache. But it is also loyal. And it is forever. He lifted her hand and pressed her palm flat against his chest, right over his heart. Through the fine fabric of his shirt, she could feel the strong, steady, and surprisingly fast beat of it. Thump thump, thump thump. It was a wild, powerful rhythm that matched her own. 13 inches, he whispered, his face so close she could feel his warm breath on her lips. That's the size of a human heart. I wasn't talking about anything else. I was warning you that I would give you all of it. Every last inch. The good, the bad, the fierce, the protective, the jealous, all of it. It would all belong to you. My promise in the garden was that I would protect you. My promise tonight is that I will love you with the same fierceness. I will give you all 13 inches of my heart. The mystery unraveled, not into something frightening, but into the most beautiful, profound confession she could ever imagine. This man, who commanded armies of shadows, was offering her the one thing he had likely never given anyone. His whole, complete and vulnerable heart. Tears welled in her eyes, but they were tears of wonder, not of fear. The last of her walls crumbled into dust. She saw him now, not just the mafia boss, but the man. A man capable of a love so vast and all-consuming it scared even him. Julian, she breathed, her voice trembling with emotion. That was all the invitation he needed. His free hand came up to cradle her jaw, his touch impossibly gentle. He leaned in and his lips met hers. It was not a timid kiss. It was acclaiming, but it was also a gift. It was a firework of new and warm feelings, just as she had imagined, but it was also so much more. It was the answer to every question, the end of every doubt. His lips were soft yet demanding, moving against hers with a hunger that spoke of long-suppressed need. It was a storm just as he had promised, a beautiful, exhilarating storm that swept her away. She kissed him back, her hands moving to his shoulders, feeling the solid, powerful muscle beneath her fingers. She was no longer an innocent girl in a silk dress. She was a woman being kissed by her husband, and it felt like coming home. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. He rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed, as if the feeling was too much to bear. "It's yours," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "It has been since I saw you with that butterfly. It will be until my last breath." Elise smiled, a true, radiant smile that lit up her whole face. She curled her fingers into the fabric of his shirt, holding on to him, anchoring herself to this man and this moment. "Then I will take it," she whispered back. "All 13 inches. And I will keep it safe forever." In the quiet of the lakeside garden, under a blanket of a million stars, their connection was sealed. It was no longer an arrangement. It was a bond, deep and special and unbreakable, forged in shadow, but destined to shine in the light. The storm had arrived, and she was no longer afraid to get swept away. The hidden house by the lake was no longer just a sanctuary, it was a home, filled with a new, vibrant energy. The quiet understanding that had blossomed between Julian and Elise now grew into a love as deep and constant as the lake itself. The world of shadows still existed, a truth Julian never hid, but it now existed outside their gates. Inside, there was only light. Elise was transformed. The nervous young woman who had trembled in a garden was gone, replaced by a confident, radiant wife. She no longer jumped at the sound of Julian's heavy footsteps in the hallway. Instead, a smile would touch her lips, and a warm, eager anticipation would flutter in her chest. She learned the rhythm of his days, the way he would return from his mysterious work, his shoulders tense, his eyes holding the ghost of the outside world's harshness. But she also learned the power she held. The moment his eyes found her, whether she was reading by the grand fireplace or arranging flowers in a vase, the transformation was instant. The ice in his gaze would melt, the hard line of his jaw would relax, and a look of pure, unguarded devotion would sweep across his face. It was a look he reserved only for her. For Elise, he was not the fearsome boss. He was simply Julian, her husband. Their evenings became a sacred ritual. After dinner, they would walk along the water's edge, his strong fingers laced perfectly with hers. They talked of everything and nothing, of childhood memories, of dreams for a future that felt, for the first time, truly theirs. He told her stories of his youth, careful tales that hinted at a past that had forged him into the man he was, and she listened, her heart aching for the boy he had been while loving the man he had become. The chemistry between them was a living thing, a constant, humming energy that filled the spaces between their words. It was in the way his hand would find the small of her back, guiding her through a doorway, his touch possessive and tender. It was in the long, lingering looks they shared across a room, a silent conversation of promise and desire that made her breath catch. It was in the way he would sometimes just watch her, his eyes dark with a warmth that had nothing to do with anger and everything to do with a love so profound it was almost frightening. One stormy night, thunder rumbled in the distance, and the rain lashed against the windows of their bedroom. Elise stood by the glass, wrapped in a silk robe, watching the lightning fork across the sky. She felt him before she saw him, his presence a comforting warmth at her back. His arms slid around her waist, pulling her gently against the solid, secure wall of his chest. He rested his chin on top of her head, and they stood in silence, watching the storm together. "It doesn't scare you?" he murmured into her hair, his voice a soft vibration against her. She leaned back into his embrace, feeling utterly safe. "How could it?" she whispered. "I'm in the eye of my own storm. It's the safest place to be." He turned her in his arms then, his hands coming up to cradle her face. The look in his eyes was one of awe, as if he still couldn't believe she was his. The air crackled around them, charged with the electricity of the storm outside and the passion within. "Do you have any idea," he began, his voice husky, "what you do to me? I spend my days in a world of concrete and lies, and all I can think about is coming home to your light. You're my peace, sis. You are the only thing that is real." He didn't wait for her answer. He lowered his head and captured her lips in a kiss that was different from the first. That one had been a question and an answer. This one was a vow, renewed. It was deep and slow and tasted of a forever they were only just beginning. It was a kiss that spoke of a shared life, of a passion that would never cool, of a bond that grew stronger with every passing moment. His hands slid from her face, down her back, pulling her even closer until there was no space left between them. The world outside, with its thunder and danger, ceased to exist. There was only his mouth on hers, his heart beating against her chest, and the unshakable knowledge that this was where she belonged. Later, as they lay tangled together in the soft sheets, the storm had passed, leaving a quiet, cleansed world in its wake. Moonlight streamed through the window, painting silver stripes across their bed. Elise had her head pillowed on his chest, her hand resting right over his heart, feeling its steady, powerful rhythm, thump thump, thump thump, the 13 inches that belonged entirely to her. Julian's fingers traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. He was quiet for a long time, but the silence was comfortable, filled with the language of their love. "Elise," he finally whispered, his voice rough with emotion in the dark. She lifted her head to look at him. In the moonlight, his face was all soft edges and devotion, the fortress walls completely down. "You didn't just get my heart," he said, his stormy eyes holding hers with an intensity that stole her breath. "You captured my soul. This," he gestured between them, to the bed, to the life they were building, "is not for a year or 10. This is for forever." Tears of pure, unadulterated joy filled her eyes. She leaned up and kissed him, a soft, sealing kiss. "Forever," she echoed against his lips. It was the perfect mix, the dangerous excitement of his world outside their gates, and the pure, safe, and fiercely passionate romance that bloomed within. He was her protector, and she was his salvation. And in each other's arms, they had found a forever that no shadow could ever touch. We hope you were swept away by Julian and Elise's intense and romantic story. If this tale of a mafia boss and his brave bride captured your heart, then you won't want to miss what we have planned next. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss a single story. We love hearing from you. Let us know in the comments where you are watching from and share your thoughts. Were you Team Julian from the start? What did you think of his 13 inches promise? We read every single comment. Thank you for watching.